If we were to sit down and work our way through the entire career of Jimmy Hart, moment after moment, we would be here all day. Jimmy was another cornerstone in the old school WWF, whether he was a good guy or a bad guy. He became known worldwide with his outrageous suits and his prop of choice, the megaphone. Jimmy's contributions to wrestling go beyond his manager role, as Jimmy Hart was also responsible for some of the best theme music in the wrestling business. Born in Jackson, Mississippi in 1943, James Ray Hart's main passion in life was music, something that would carry over into his career in professional wrestling. During his teenage years, long before he got involved in professional wrestling, Jimmy was a vocalist in the 60s band The Gentrys. This wasn't just a small band playing songs in southern bars and clubs. The Gentrys had a million-selling song released in 1965 called Keep On Dancing. Keep On Dancing was actually a cover song, not written by the Gentrys, but still a successful release for the band. The band's next releases were not as popular as Keep On Dancing, and subsequently, some members decided to leave to pursue other career options. Jimmy Hart stuck around and reformed the band, getting the Gentrys signed to a new label and getting the band booked into nightclubs around Memphis. They still could not reach the same success as they once had years prior. Jimmy Hart attended high school with a Memphis wrestling legend, one Jerry the King Lawler. Jerry Lawler was making a name for himself all around Memphis, becoming very much a local hero who was beginning to get worldwide acclaim. Jerry wanted to record a song, so he asked Jimmy Hart to do some backup vocals. This led to Jimmy Hart becoming Jerry Lawler's wrestling manager in the Memphis area. When Jimmy Hart split away from Jerry Lawler, he created his own stable known as Hart's First Family of Wrestling, a group that was set up to feud with the King. Looking back now, the First Family in Memphis is like a wrestling supergroup, including members such as Ravishing Rick Rude, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, Randy Savage, Bobby Eaton, Kendo Nagasaki, The Iron Sheik, Kevin Sullivan and King Kong Bundy. Of course, Jimmy would go on to manage a load more wrestlers in the WWF, but more on that later. Jimmy Hart was very much involved in the Andy Kaufman Jerry Lawler feud too, something that is kind of forgotten about these days. Jimmy Hart and Andy Kaufman went everywhere together during Andy's time in Memphis, and during a radio interview where Jimmy wouldn't stop talking and Andy couldn't get a word in, Andy said to the DJ, "You can't get a word in edgewise, they might as well call him the mouth of the South." And so the name stuck, according to Jimmy Hart anyway. Jimmy also revealed that he was put with Andy Kaufman in case something happened, like Andy getting cold feet or a match getting totally botched. Jimmy was more of a backup plan than anything else, but he done what he needed to do. It's a shame that his contributions to this historic angle are somewhat forgotten. Around this time, Jerry Lawler recorded a song that poked fun at Jimmy Hart. The entire music video is available on YouTube, albeit with not so great quality, but it's a miracle that this footage has survived this long anyway. Set to the music of Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters, Jerry the King Lawler recorded Wimp Busters. Jerry Lawler had been calling Hart a wimp for quite some time, having the fans chant "wimp" at Jimmy, all that stuff. Jerry Lawler went a step beyond and recorded, and yes, officially released, Wimp Busters, a song all about Jerry Lawler being afraid of no wimp. This song was actually available to buy in stores. Check out the music video when you have the opportunity. It's so bad that it's good. In 1985, Jimmy Hart grabbed a fresh microphone and made his way to the WWF, and boy, here's where things get convoluted. Let's try to tick off who he managed in order, as going in depth on every wrestler, angle and storyline would honestly make this video around 6 hours long. First, in the WWF, Jimmy Hart managed Greg the Hammer Valentine, who was the Intercontinental Champion at the time. After Valentine lost the title, Jimmy managed the team of Valentine and Brutus Beefcake, better known as the Dream Team. He was eventually phased out of the Dream Team and control was given over to Johnny Valiant. Hart around this time also managed King Kong Bundy, a man who he would trade with another heel manager, Bobby Heenan, in return for the missing link and Adrian Adonis. It was Jimmy Hart who helped Adonis establish his adorable Adrian character. Jimmy also looked after the Funk family during their stint in the WWF, which included Jimmy Jack Funk, Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk. 1985 also saw the WWF debut of Bret the Hitman Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Jimmy Hart became their manager, forming the Hart Foundation. Jimmy would manage the team to Tag Team Gold when Bret and Jim defeated the British Bulldogs. Jimmy was then given the name of the Colonel when he managed the Honky Tonk Man, guiding him to the Intercontinental title in the process. The Honky Tonk Man's IC title reign lasted over a year, and it seemed, with the gimmicks and all, that Jimmy Hart and the Honky Tonk Man were practically made for each other. A little bit later, Hart clients Greg Valentine and the Honky Tonk Man would team up to become Rhythm and Blues, though the team was quite short-lived. When Jimmy Hart was fired from the Hart Foundation, he began managing the fabulous Rougeau brothers, beginning a feud between the two teams. The feud between Jimmy Hart and the Hart Foundation would continue on for quite a few years, but more on that a little later. In 1989, Hart added Dino Bravo and Earthquake to his list of villainous wrestlers under his wing. Dino Bravo was feuding with the Ultimate Warrior, and eventually Earthquake would feud against Hulk Hogan, therefore pushing Jimmy into more of the main event picture. To continue the feud with the Hart Foundation, Jimmy Hart managed the Nasty Boys, a team who would dethrone Bret and Jim as WWF Tag Champions. The Nasty Boys would lose the titles to the Legion of Doom at SummerSlam 91, which led to the formation of the Natural Disasters, Earthquake and Typhoon, a team put together to take out the new tag champs. When this failed, Jimmy Hart formed a new tag team called Money Incorporated, featuring IRS and the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. Just before this, Jimmy Hart brought in the Mountie, resulting in a short IC title reign and going on to feud with the Big Boss Man. So all this healing it up for years would eventually change when Jimmy Hart found out he actually had a heart. When Money Inc. attacked Brutus Beefcake, of all people, Jimmy felt sorry for the barber and decided to step away from DiBiase and IRS. Hulk Hogan was brought in to tag up with Brutus, and at WrestleMania 9, Jimmy Hart managed the babyface team, who ended up losing by DQ. That being said, on the very same night, Hulk Hogan won the WWF Championship in an impromptu match. Notable here because this was the very first time Jimmy Hart had managed the WWF Champion. When Hulk Hogan left the WWF after King of the Ring in 1993, Jimmy Hart followed him. The pair showed up together in WCW, and Hart managed Hogan to his first WCW title win at Bash at the Beach 94. Jimmy remained by Hulk's side until Halloween Havoc 95, where Jimmy turned on the Hulkster and sided with the Giant. Hart went on to manage the Dungeon of Doom, and he even managed Ric Flair. He would eventually reform the First Family, albeit now as a lower mid-card group. The WCW First Family included members such as Hugh Morris, Brian Knobbs, Jerry Flynn, and the Barbarian. Jimmy would continue to make appearances on WCW TV, but was eventually put into a more backstage role. He became the lead writer for WCW Saturday Night in the months prior to the show's cancellation, and while he had some matches on TV against radio personality Mancow, Jimmy was put in the WCW booking committee by 2001. After things collapsed in WCW, Jimmy joined TNA in 2003 and remained there for a number of years, seemingly coming and going when he was needed with not much rhyme or reason. He most notably managed the Naturals and the Nasty Boys during their tenure in TNA, and he again was phased into a more backstage role within the organisation. He re-signed with the WWE eventually in 2011, where he would make appearances during special editions of Raw and SmackDown. He was also a cast member on WWE's Legends House show on the WWE Network, where he done a fantastic job of annoying his fellow housemates. Something we should not look over, and something I feel is one of Hart's greatest contributions to wrestling, is the amount of theme music he had written for the WWE and WCW. Some of the most iconic theme songs in wrestling were written by Jimmy Hart, and a lot of the time these very themes have been miscredited as Jim Johnston Productions, another man who wrote an incredible amount of memorable entrance themes. Shawn Michaels' Sexy Boy theme, Dusty Rhodes' Common Man Boogie, the Rockers theme, the Hart Foundation theme, the Hunky Tonk Man's Cool Cocky Bad song, Ted DiBiase's theme, all of these were Jimmy Hart creations. You might also be surprised to learn that the Wolfpac theme used in WCW was written by Jimmy Hart. The fucking Wolfpac theme was written by Jimmy Hart. That still blows my mind. Throughout his years as a manager, Jimmy Hart done his job well. While his name doesn't fall into the shortlist of greatest manager of all time for a lot of people, his ringside character done what it was meant to do. I don't feel that Jimmy Hart as a babyface was all that great, as when he was managing the likes of Hulk Hogan, it felt that he was riding the Hulkster's coattails, which isn't a fair assessment. Jimmy, I feel, was at his best when he was the slimy little heel. As a heel, most people wanted this guy to get stomped out, and he would frequently hide behind his clients, becoming more like the little kid with a big mouth who would set his big nasty brothers on you if you ever talked shit. This was the Jimmy Hart I liked, a role I felt he played perfectly. He looked like he couldn't beat up anyone, but man, his buddies sure could.